take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. So what I'm going to talk about today is keeping the connection. Transfer of merit ceremony is a wonderful way of keeping the connection. We're acknowledging that there is a connection and we are acting on it. It's a wonderful time to transfer merit. The world needs it. Yeah. There's a lot of raw suffering going on. There's a lot of fear and anxiety. Fear between religious groups, between political groups, toward anything and anyone we don't know about. Transferring merit is one of the most powerful antidotes to fear. And I will say something about that a little bit later. But two of the most profound teachings expressed in this ceremony is, of course, the first one is that there is merit. And the second one is that it can be offered, it can be transferred, it can be made of use of because of our deep interconnection with one another and with all things. Now, we even have some scientific confirmation of that, which I want to share with you. I love this story. It's from a book called Proof of Heaven by Dr. Eben Alexander. He is a brain surgeon whose reality was science until he had a very profound near-death experience. Okay, his brain shut down for 7 days, and he was in a coma. He had an infection in his brain. And during that time, he was able to appreciate, through his years of scientific training, the truth of the truth that he saw through the eyes of what we would call Buddha nature. And this is how he describes some of it. He says, all the objects in the physical universe are made up of atoms. Atoms, in turn, are made up of protons, electrons, and neutrons. These, in turn, as physicists discovered in the early years of the 20th century, are all particles. He says, one thing we know about particles is that each one is connected to every other one in the universe. Every particle is connected to every other particle in the universe. They are all at the deepest level connected. And then he goes on to say, each of us are intricately, irremovably connected to the larger universe. It is our true home. And thinking that this physical world is all that matters is like shutting yourself up in a small closet and imagining there's nothing else beyond it. And then he goes on to say that talk about the crucial power of belief in facilitating mind over matter. And he says, I was often bemused as a medical student over the confounding power of the placebo effect. Medical studies had to overcome the 30% or so benefit that was attributed to patients believing that they were receiving medicine that would help them, even if it was simply an inert substance. In other words, medical science kept trying to figure out how to get that out of the way instead of recognizing the immense power, the power of faith and belief, which is what he saw. Now, he's describing, this incredible interconnection, and some of us may be thinking, gee, well, where have we heard about that before? Well, didn't we just celebrate the Avatamsaka scripture a few weeks ago, in which it is so very clearly spelled out our incredible interconnection in the worlds within the worlds and how everything is one. So that's kind of encouraging. So, this interconnection is reflected in the word religion. The word religion, because the Latin word of religion, so it starts out with which means do it again. And ligios is the same as ligament, connecting. Okay? So, reconnecting, the essence of religion is reconnecting. We are, and the thing is, of course, the connection is always there, but perhaps it's for us more accurate to say we are once again recognizing our connection. And when we are transferring merit, we are connecting with that which is greater than ourselves and that which embraces everything within it. So the second thing that I wanted to say a bit about is the idea that there is merit. In our ceremony, we are expressing our acknowledgement that there is essential goodness in the world. Now, we may sometimes find this difficult to see in that we are bombarded by so many strange and violent events, but there's a lot more going on than what we see on the internet. I think it's helpful for us to remember that we're living in the human realm, from the Buddhist point of view, the 6 realms of existence. So this is the human realm. This is the realm of birth and death, the world of samsara. Samsara is an interesting word. Actually, the Sanskrit means going around in circles. So, it's not horrible. I mean, it's just tiring, isn't it? This going around in circles. Yeah. So, and I've been reflecting on the fact and talking to some monks of the same generation. A lot of us had very high expectations in growing up. We grew up with Hollywood, right? A lot of Hollywood films. Some of you are smiling, you may remember. So there were people riding off into the sunset and happy endings and 7 brides for 7 brothers, and all these musicals. Everything worked out evenly, and it was great. So turns out, of course, the reality is somewhat different, but people in other cultures very often observe that Americans are very, very idealistic. And we often are saddled with ideals, that we can't possibly live up to. Recently, somebody was telling me that they were working with an international organization that was dealing with hunger relief, and that their goal was zero hunger. And they said that it was so overwhelming to think of that goal that they did not think they were going to continue to be able to work in that agency that had that kind of view. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because isn't that the farthest thing that we would imagine, isn't it? Because of the intention, of wanting to help, wanting to eliminate hunger. But it reminds me of our Buddhist thing that we say, hope for the best, expect the worst, and do the possible. Do the possible. So, even though we have this idea, that the lion will lie down with the lamb, that's a beautiful image. The thing of it is, for us, I think what's more important is that there is something greater than is holding both the lion and the lamb. whether they ever lie down together or not. The important thing is what is embracing both of them and everything else. And that is what we open ourselves to when we transfer merit. So, how do we keep in touch with that connection after the ceremony is over? Of course, the thing is that the basis of that connection is, of course, our meditation, which we can, I want to say, tune into. You know, I grew up with radio. We used to talk about stay tuned, tuning into things. But actually, of course, our meditation is always there if we can just kind of get rid of the static, I think, so we can actually be in touch with it. But, you know, anytime we just make gasho to somebody, we're offering merit. If we're driving down the freeway and we see an animal that's been hit and is lying next to the freeway, if we just take a moment and offer merit for it. If we hear a siren going off, we can just stop for a moment and offer merit for whoever is in trouble there. You know, during the summer we had so much smoke in the air for months. And I went into our local hospital, Mercy Hospital, and they had all over, there were these posters and all kinds of things that were thanking the first responders and thanking the firemen and all the medical people who were attending to everyone. And the slogan was, "The kindness in the air is thicker than the smoke." So we can learn to see the essential goodness all around us. Venerable Yoka Genkaku has this wonderful phrase that he says, "Do not malign the vast blue heavens as you peer at them through a hollow reed." Isn't that a wonderful image? You know, you just kind of, something like that. So do not think that no one out there is keeping the precepts. I remember going into Walmart one day in my robes, and one of the gentlemen came up to me and asked me if I was a Buddhist, and I said yes, and he said, "What does Buddhism say about killing insects?" He said he'd been watching on television. There was a malaria epidemic in Africa, and they were talking about their concern about the children and a number of ways that they were going to eliminate mosquitoes, and he wanted to know about that. He said, "The Bible tells us not to kill animals, but doesn't say anything about insects. So what about that?" So, you know, that was a very humbling thing. And I think we find when we go out in our robes, which we do, people approach us very often to ask questions about the Dharma. Maybe it's Buddhist, maybe it's just a question that they have. But I always find it very moving, because somehow the fact that we are dressed in robes, people feel comfortable enough to open their hearts and ask a question. There's enough trust there in something that they can have faith in, and that there is some help there. One day when I was in the mall in Wairika, a kind of rough and ready guy came up to me and he said, "Are you a Buddhist?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I just got out of the slammer. I was in it for 15 years. He said, "And while I was in there, I read about a lot of different religions. He said Buddhism was the only one that made any sense to me. There wasn't any question or anything. I felt like he just wanted to connect for a minute. Just wanted to have, be able to do that. So people are constantly changing and can turn around on a dime, And our scriptures tell us that all people and all things have inherent great potentiality. And we don't know where anyone is on their own journey. And that the smallest act can open a door or bring about a transformation when all conditions ripen. So I love to read about conversion stories. I think we all do. It gives us hope in our own ability to change. And recently, there have been a number of stories written, some in particular about neo-Nazis who have gone through some dramatic conversion, often through one of their kids, and then have gone out to address other hate groups and help people turn their hearts around. And, that's very inspiring. But I would like to share a short story, which is much more subtle, and I think more relevant to us because it happens all around us. I think this is going on all the time if we can just open our eyes to see it. It's called A Lesson in Judgment. So this is from a book by Sandy Johnson. She was interviewing Tibetan elders. And it's a lovely book. She was given references about particular Tibetans that had, because of the nature of their lives, were outstanding, and so she was making a collection of these people. They came from various walks of life. She says, a teaching came in an unexpected way the day I met with Geshe-la. Before our interview, we'd had lunch at an outdoor cafe near the studio where he meets the students. At the adjoining table sat 4 men bantering back and forth about business in voices loud enough to all but drown out Geshe-la's soft, accented voice. The men spoke cynically in the hard-edged way people do when they're trying to top each other's stories. I strained to hear Geshe and tried to block out these other voices, in my mind all the while madly judging these men. The waitress forgot to bring milk for Geshe-la's tea, and I went inside to get some. When I came back, one of the men was looking at Geshe-la, commenting on his monk's robes, and said, "Must be hot in that get-up," he said. "What are you?" Geshe-la smiled happily and explained he was a Tibetan monk, and no, it wasn't terribly hot today. Quite pleasant, he said, and he chuckled as I fumed. After a while, the men got up to leave. One stopped at our table and said, "I must tell you, sir, I couldn't take my eyes off you. You have a spiritual aura. I have never seen anything quite so extraordinary." Geshe-la beamed, and he extended his hand and introduced himself. The man mentioned that he had a friend who did business with the Chinese, and he made frequent trips. He said, "They're changing, you know. The new guard wants to put an end to communism. I bet in 5-10 years you'll get your country back." Still smiling, Geshe-la's eyes had misted over. He took the man's hand again, and he thanked him profusely. The man's face was full of wonder. His whole demeanor had changed. Slightly embarrassed, he suddenly bowed like a schoolboy and rushed off. And she says, I had witnessed a transformation of a sort I would not have thought possible. And not only that, of course, her own transformation. It was a double transformation. So, this thing is happening all the time. It's going on all the time, all around us. So Melvin MacLeod, in one of the Buddhist magazines, says, how can we trust the goodness of the world if we don't trust the goodness of our own hearts? And he's talking about something in Berkeley, something called the Greater Good Science Center, that has a website to offer ways to help people notice the good they do every day. I mean, isn't that lovely? So it's not about what other people are doing. Help us see the good that we are doing every day. So the more that we can see the goodness of our own heart, I think the more willing we can be to see where we might have fallen short. When we offer merit, we're opening up and reaching out, and we may come face to face with aversion and fear. Now think of putting a picture of the person you're having the most difficulty with, or the situation that you are most fearful of, on your altar or on your dresser, and offering incense or loving kindness for their benefit. Now, when I have said this to individual people, they have said, but I can't stand to look at them. Right? So we can bet that we will encounter resistance or upset, because that's why there's a problem to begin with. So, of course, it's going to come up as soon as you just are looking right at it. But if you can do this, this is an act of great courage. It really is. And it's a time to ask for help from Avalokiteshvara to turn the stream of compassion within so that we can be still enough and see clearly enough without judgment in that moment about how it is that we're cutting ourselves off from our own Buddha nature. Because that's what happens as soon as we, because of our interconnection, we can't really turn away from somebody without turning away from ourselves. As scary as that is, it takes the mystery out of how we got ourselves in the mess that we are in right now in the world. We can say, oh yeah, I get that. We're doing that on a national level. We're doing it on a global level. So, there isn't any monolithic evil out there that is responsible for all of our ills. When I was thinking about this talk, I was remembering a comic strip. I don't know if it's still around or not. Pogo Possum. Very popular when I was living in Berkeley. Pogo Possum. It was a possum living in the deep swamps of the deep south, living in a swamp with his swamp friends, and periodically he would make a very profound reflection. And the one that we all really loved and became a classic is, he said one day back in the 70s, we are the people our parents warned us about. So we all have our prejudices and our fears and anxieties. And for me, a source of great help has been Achalanata. As I said, offering merit is a great antidote to fear. We have a heavenly guardian ceremony here every evening that some of you may know about. You may have seen bits and pieces of it. One of the senior monks goes to the shrine here and does the ceremony and offers incense, asks for merit and help for the night ahead, for all beings, and in particular for those living here in the monastery and the surrounding area. Basically, it is a hope that things will quiet down so that we can all have a peaceful night and make use of the night in the service of our training. Everyone can have a peaceful and quiet and harmonious night. And then we walk around the monastery carrying the sword of Buddha's wisdom. And we bless the monastery and we bless the gates. And here's an interesting thing. We all have our own way of doing this, I guess, but it came to, let me see how to say this. So, when I go out to bless the gate, I take something that Reverend Master Jiyu talked about in her. She was talking about doing a sagaki and how to grow a lotus blossom. And it has to do with saying that everything that believes it is not part of the Buddha nature, do not enter. It doesn't say, do not enter. It says if you believe you aren't part of the Buddha nature. Because if you believe you aren't part of the Buddha nature, you can make a lot of trouble. But I then like to add what she said in her ceremony. Stay in your own true place, where you too will in time become Buddha. So there is that wish, and this is really what we do at our sagaki ceremonies. We invite all the gakis in, and we try to help them see their own purity by all the merit that we are offering. To see their own potential for Buddhahood, and to do whatever we can to help. Now, when we walk around then we circumambulate the monastery. We walk all around it and make sure that lights are out and everything is safe. And we recite a dharani as we walk. And this is Mambo Kojin, is the fierce protector of the three treasures. This was also the protector of Sojiji, which was Reverend Master Jiyu's temple in Japan, where she trained, and he is now our protector. And we recite the Om Kembaya, which some of you know because we use it in other ceremonies, and it's Om Kembaya, Umbata Soaka. Now here's the thing. This mantra is not dispelling evil. It is dispelling fear and terror. Boy, when I found that out, I thought, gosh, what is going on here? And so then I found out one night when I was out at the Compassionate Friend Hermitage. I don't do very well on my own at night in places that are somewhat remote. This goes back actually to when I was a kid. I can remember we had a 2-story house, and I was younger than my sister, so I used to sit at the top of the stairs when it was time to go to bed and wait for her to come up to go to bed because I didn't want to be in the top floor by myself. So this is pretty deeply ingrained, and even with all these years of training, Okay, still something I have to deal with. So sometimes when I have been out at the Compassionate Friend Hermitage, I have had the feeling that I'm not alone in the house there. And I have done many things to try to deal with that, including trying to talk myself out of it, which has never worked. I don't find trying to talk yourself out of things is a very successful spiritual tool, but we fall back on it sometimes in desperation. But one night when I was out there, so I would always go into the meditation hall before bed, and I would do the same a short version of a ceremony that we do here in front of the altar there. And one night it occurred to me to ask for a peaceful night for whoever was sharing the space there, whatever was sharing the space there and on the grounds, and then, in the whole area, in the whole neighborhood, whatever was there. Because I didn't want to leave anything out. Didn't want to turn away from anything. And I begin to ask that we all have a peaceful night together, that we all have a harmonious night, free from fear, free from anger. Let us all have a safe and harmonious night. And it dispelled the fear, because it's very hard to feel afraid of something or somebody that you are offering merit for and wishing well. And that is the teaching of the transfer of merit ceremony. Thank you. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha.